That was my next question. I wanted to ask you, given that our field is huge on boundaries and you are the therapist, clients do not know anything about you, and you know everything about the clients, right? It's this very one-sided, you become completely naked and vulnerable for me. Trust me that I can hold that, but I will maintain all walls around myself because this isn't about me, it's about you. And in that, my personal and professional opinion around that, after spending a couple decades in the field, is that I believe that some of it is our training, what we've been taught, but a lot of it is our own discomfort with sitting there with the mirror in our face. Typically, if we are aligned with the clients that we're supposed to have, those clients that are in that space, and this is a whole entirely different conversation we can go down to when it comes to choosing the client and the clients being able to choose you and there being an alignment with that client therapist relationship. So I'll kind of bookmark that. But when you're aligned with the right clients, they should be holding a mirror up to you. It is a parallel process. I think Irvin Yalom said it best when he said, we're fellow journeymen. Like, part of what really stood out for me, what you said, is my clients were able to experience more growth because of your authenticity. And yes, because of that, and because we are literally modeling for them that it is okay to show yourself. Because by the time people come in and they feel like you're the therapist, you're the expert, they sometimes can look at you just for that role and forget that you're a human person, you're a myriad of things. Some of them deeply flawed, some of them troubled or challenged, and some of it is situational, and others of it is just who you are at the core. Like, who I am at the core is tardy for others. I just have a different concept of time for me, right? And so a big part of that was I learned that if I was going to do what I was going to do at the best and not have these feelings of guilt and shame around me showing up for my clients, I had to let them know during consultations I may often be running a few minutes behind. Typically, it's because I go for the amount of time that I need to go to with my client to get them where they need to be. That can be looked at as a flaw, and that can be a very bad misfit if it causes a client to have an intense amount of anxiety, right? And so, in that, being able to understand that me sharing that part of myself lets the clients know it's okay to share that part of you and to accept it, right? That's the whole point of the love and acceptance, to accept that this is something that others may perceive as a flaw. I perceive it as part of who I am at my core. And so, to your point, when I don't remember things or when I forget things, my clients are keenly aware of how engaged I am because I'm very present with them. And they also may know that there may be things that I forget to do. Possibly I said I would send a homework assignment and I don't. So I've asked ahead of time that I am the person that I will go beyond and do more. And sometimes I may need a reminder. So if you ever don't get something from me, it is not a bother for you to come back and tell me. It may have slipped my mind. I do sometimes have brain fog or moments where I can't really remember things right off. And so giving one therapist permission to not have to be superhuman, right? And so if you're somebody that has a chronic illness or dynamic disability and what you're able to do or how you're able to do it varies, not feeling like you have to be the self sacrificial lamb that has to show up regardless. We often do ourselves, and not only ourselves, but our clients a disservice. Because if we show up in a space of where, say, you have a terrible migraine or your brain fog is so heavy from an inability to sleep or all the myriad of things that happen with us when we have those disabilities that come with almost like syndromes that come with a bevy of symptoms that pop up at any time, if I'm facing that and I'm challenged by that and I can't get from under it, I can't be fully present with my client. So I don't just do myself a disservice and not get allow myself the time to heal and get better, or at least get to a point where it's manageable, but I also do the client a disservice as well because I don't give them then space to do what it is that they need to do, which is be able to fully get engagement from me that is present engagement. I'm distracted. I'm trying to not wince in pain because I'm in a ton of pain. And so I tell people, don't grin and bear it. it does yourself a disservice and it does the client a disservice. And so being able to, it's different if I tell my clients, if you see me looking low energy, it's because my energy is low today, but I'm fully present with you. I may not smile and giggle as much today, but I'm fully present and I wouldn't be here if I wasn't fully present. So I love that you said being able to acknowledge that thing, being able to share your truth with the client, and then the clients get it. My clients, like much like yours, have stuck through, have stuck by me, and I check in with them to make sure, are they seen, are they heard, do they feel validated? They feel like they got a chance each session to address what they most needed to address. And I think as long as we're doing that, that's most important. There was another question that I kind of wanted to ask you. For therapists that have clients that may have dynamic disabilities, I often see things in a lot of therapist groups that talk about things like no-show policies, cancellation policies, or clients' apathy towards doing the work and them being frustrated. But as a client, and you think about people being perceived as being lazy or not committed or not showing up, as a client, what would you say to therapists that may have those perceptions of clients that may have a dynamic disability that creates more forgetfulness than normal, or brain fog, or fatigue, or any of those symptoms that often come up that may impact how their session goes, or even if they show up for their session?
So, with respect to that, I think about it two ways. If you have designed a practice where you're dedicated to serving people in that population, you have to have some degree of flexibility.
Mhm,
So, I do have a cancellation policy, but it really exists for people to not abuse my time,
mhm,
not to punish people. So, if I have a client and I do, have folks who are like suffer with chronic migraines or have certain health concerns, and they're typically showing up, etc., I'm not typically penalizing them for those things. And I've I I've had colleagues, friends who seem to really struggle with people abusing their time and these policies, and then they struggle around setting the fee and then charging the fee.
mhm,
And I feel very lucky that I haven't really had that struggle,
mhm.
because the relationship I've built around this money thing
Yeah,
is different. And that's informed by what I mentioned earlier about trying to build a different kind of practice, or what we would say is a decolonized practice.
yeah,
What it's like to have a different policy around money that is decentered from whiteness.
yeah,
So that's one. But the other, I would say, is if it's like maybe only one of your clients, right? Because it's not your area,
yeah.
like, have some grace.
Mhm,
I have a good friend of mine who is a clinical psychologist as well, and she has several dynamic disabilities. And she had a therapist say to her that she wasn't committed to therapy because she asked for a few phone sessions or had to cancel because her migraine was so bad.
oh, wow. Okay.
So this person was penalizing her for not being able to show up in person, even though not in person, but virtually over
Yeah,
the screen. And you should be able to be flexible, you know?
absolutely.
And most insurance policies now allow coverage for phone sessions.
Mhm.
You don't need to be lazy about figuring out how to bill it. You'll get paid.
Yeah,
But there are a lot of punitive therapists out there when it comes to this, because they're not experienced or understand the kind of flexibility that some people need. It doesn't mean that they're not dedicated to the process.
mhm,
And the fact that you are responding to them in that way is actually not helping the pain
yeah,
process.
yeah,
So those are two things I would say. And I just wanted to quickly go back to something else, because you said a lot before.
yeah.
But I think it's ironic that this is one of the few professions where we're like, the relationship is an important part of change and healing,
Mm,
but don't show any of yourself in this relationship.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like, it's such a contradiction. And I'm also a child clinician,
mhm,
and we are totally being ourselves when we're getting down on the floor and playing with kids,
yeah,
because they will call you out. if they notice that you're not really playing with them.
Yeah.
And play is a central part of change and healing and joy. And why is it that we rob adults of that just because they're adults, you know? And so I think that thinking about the relationship as playful in some ways reminds us to be human in those interactions as well.
Yeah. I think there's so much. I love that you said that because I think about like when I read things in a lot of our therapist groups, the different groups that are out there. And I think about how everyone is so ethics crazy and this is against the rules and always throwing somebody in therapy ethics jail for certain things that are done. And I think instead of us thinking that we're subscribing to certain rules that often weren't meant for communities of persons that look like us, I think what would probably be better suited is figuring out what is the most impactful in a positive way for the communities that we work with and for the persons that we work with. And so when I think about working with persons that may be similar to me, to your point, I have policies in place. And so I might waive one if it's just like, well, I forgot, but there's not a disability, there's not anything going on. It's just, I just forgot. And if somebody is sick, they're sick, right? But when there are people who I know genuinely want it and they're challenged with it, even creating something like, you know what, I'll reschedule with no fee as long as you reschedule within the next few days, right? Because I don't want to then create too much for me next week too. So, but there's to your point, we don't have to be, I won't even say lazy because I don't really, I try not to use that word as much, but let's try not to be so unmotivated and uninspired to create solutions for people that we're choosing to work with. Like this is a choice. Every client we work with, we are choosing to work there. Even if you work in a community-based mental health or you work at a hospital, you may not choose to work with that client, but you chose the field and you chose the job. And so being having a level of awareness when we come into these spaces that we're choosing to be here. And so there's a measure of grace that we need to give to populations that we work with that are inherently coming to us because they're not well in some way. Sometimes it may be a mental illness, and other times it's just personal growth. I'm not at my best. I don't suffer from any mental illness, but I'm just not at my best and I'm trying to grow. And I need a level or measure of grace in that. So I find that sometimes I've talked to therapists that honestly feel like I have lax boundaries and they're like, well, clients will walk all over you when you do that, when you let them do that. And I'm like, my 20 plus years of experience tells me otherwise. I have seldom had cancellations. This week was, this past week, everything was happening for my clients. And so a couple of them had to cancel the session within the amount of time, they get within 24 hours. So they canceled within 2 days and said, "Is there a way that we can just do it next week?" But most of them wanted to know, "Do you have any other availability this week? I've had 3 things come up. I can't really move them. I wanna get my session in." And so I find when you're open and honest with people, right, and when you model a level of flexibility and less rigidity, they give you that very same thing back.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I've seen. You know, I find, as I said, my colleagues who have had a little bit more rigidity, but also struggle with enforcing their policies,
Mhm.
often struggle the most. And I have seen the opposite with the flexibility. And like you said, I feel very lucky that I rarely have cancellations. And, you know, a client might text me and say, hey, I have a doctor's appointment today that's urgent. Can I see you later in the week? And I'll let them know if I can or can't, you
Yeah.
know. But my time is not abused.
Mhm.
And I think that the relationships that we have built ensures that mutual respect.
Yep.
And so I've personally found no issue with my approach,
Yeah.
even though I think that, yeah, some people might criticize it.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you said about the relationship and these aren't your words, but basically it can be one way. Like we talk about the therapeutic rapport being so important, right? That's one of the biggest parts of change in this process. Yet it's this one way transactional where you tell me everything and I tell you nothing. you bear your all and I show no vulnerability. And I believe in a degree of reciprocity. No, we don't hijack our client sessions and make it about us, of course. Of course you have boundaries. Of course you make the client sessions about them and what they need. And I do believe that you need to show a bit of who you are and not just what you are. Yes, I'm a therapist, and yet I'm still human. I'm still Sheree. I'm Sheree when I leave here. I'm Sheree that also has problems. I saw a funny meme this morning on one of the therapist sites, and it said, "What do you do when your client?" What did it say? Something like, "What do you do when your clients are dealing when you're dealing with the same shit your clients are dealing with?" And everybody's like looking like, "Yeah, what do you do?" And I think, I laughed and it was really funny and at the same time sad because I think, th you know, a lot of them probably didn't get the training or don't have the understanding that that is an opportunity, right? That is an opportunity not to make it about you, but to be able to validate from a place of empathy, that compassionate empathy, because you do understand and you do get it. And so it's less about finding the solution for the client, and I don't have the solution, so what do I do? And more about providing that safety, security, and space, reflecting to them what you hear them saying, asking them evocative questions so that they can kind of find their way as well, and being willing to understand that because we're on this lifelong journey together, right? This journey of life together, and you're collaborating the same way that they may take away insights and wisdom from you is the same way you should be taking away insights and wisdom from them.
Well, and sometimes the wisdom is just being with someone.
Hmm.
And I think that COVID has forced that upon us.
Yeah.
It's been a great opportunity for those of us building decolonized practices,
Hmm.
but we cannot pretend that we as therapists have not been impacted by COVID.
Hmm.
And so there have been many times that I'm sitting across my from my client, hearing them say exactly what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I might say something like, "Yeah, I'm with you."
Yeah.
I'm with you. I get it, and I don't know what to do
Yeah.
because we were not prepared for this.
Hmm.
And I've had consistent feedback that even though that might seem like a destabilizing thing to say, it's actually been very stabilizing
Hmm.
because they feel less alone.
Yeah.
And so, and again, back to like working with kids, sometimes you're just with them. Like that's the work.
Yeah.
And we don't have to have fancy things to say all the time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that really comes up for me, what I always tell my clients is, I don't want to have all the answers for you because when you make your way through this journey and as you progress, you'll attribute it to me. Like, Sheree, if it wasn't for you, and the truth is the answer was in you all along, almost like the Wizard of Oz. Like, you had the answer in you all along. What I did was provided safety and space for you to explore securely,
Right.
right?
We could be curious together about your mind.
Absolutely. And so that you could start tearing down the barriers and obstacles that were around you that were preventing you from connecting to the deepest part of you, connecting to that intuition so that you could learn how to guide yourself. And so I think it's really important the part that you said about learning how to just be there with them and not have all the answers. There's sometimes when you can provide insight and wisdom, but one of the most insightful things that I learned and that I hope I pass on to all my clients is nobody has the answer for you but you. Nobody has the people have an answer, right? I can go to a doctor today about a problem. They have an answer, but nobody has the answer that we usually need to get us out of what we're feeling or what we're experiencing. They have they have theories that may or may not be accurate, but nobody has the answer but you. And I can't even if I thought I had it, I could never get there without you. That's the reason why it's that teamwork, the work that we do with as clinicians with our clients. And I think once we remember that, then when it comes to things like someone having a dynamic disability or someone being from a different culture, right? Because even all persons of color don't come from the same culture. All Black people don't come from the same culture. So even being able to understand culture, being able to understand what you're coming into this room with and allowing you to teach me about you, but also being curious enough to learn, right? I think those are the things that are super impactful that we don't always recognize or realize. And I think we miss opportunities. There was one more question, and I know that I can actually ask you like 20 more questions um, because they're all running through my mind. Thank you, ADD. Um, I get hyper.
Well, this is what happens when we talk, though.
It is. It is. We can
We'll be like,
literally,
we're only talking for this long, and then it's 2
right?
hours later.
Well, we weren't recording. I think one time we were on for like 2 hours and 40 minutes when we were just talking. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you is if there is someone out there as a client, right? Or and they have been no one's client, or maybe they have and they had a poor experience, and there's someone that suffers from a dynamic disability. There's someone that may suffer from some kind of chronic illness, and or someone that comes from a marginalized or oppressed community that feels like there's nobody out there that understands them, or that their community has by and large stigmatized mental health or stigmatized seeking help or working with anyone. What is something that you would say to them about their feelings of frustration and exhaustion and them wanting change but not knowing how to get to it?
That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
I think it would be just disingenuous to say that searching for support is easy in the first place. And then you add on to the fact that the pool of people is not great either, right? To find that good fit clinician is can be like a needle in a haystack, and especially now since COVID,
Hmm.
therapists are swamped.
Yeah.
And so even the search can be really demoralizing. And I think it's a weighing of what sort of level of distress is going on in my life, what things are impacted, what do I feel like I'm not working through, and do I feel like I really do need that support, and therefore sort of encouraging people to remember that that search is hard,
Yeah.
and like finding a new doctor, because every time I have to find a new doctor because somebody has said something racist or something inappropriate has happened with my care, I am totally demoralized.
Yeah.
And then I try to give myself some breathing room between those and then try again.
Yeah.
And I know that's easy for me to say, but part of my motivation comes from reminding myself over and over and over again that I deserve a certain kind of care.
Hmm.
And I think for those of us who have disabilities of various kinds, we also may carry the idea that we don't deserve.
Hmm.
And reminding myself I deserve this is what has kept me continuing to find those new doctors, to look for a therapist who's been a better fit, to take people to task, you know, when I've had the energy to do so, or bring an ally if I have one who can help me. And some of us, we don't have that. I get that. Um, and I would also say, I think the cool thing is that we live in an age where there's a ton of just free resources too.
Hmm.
The disability TikTok, even though TikTok is a cesspool in its own right for different reasons, disability TikTok is a really fun place to live,
Hmm.
because I found so many different people who are talking about their disabilities and the wisdom that they've gained and strategies that they've found for getting through the day, or even being able to stand up in the shower, or all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Living a green lifestyle as someone with a disability. We're surrounded by free resources if you can't access services.
Hmm.
And so I'm always trying to connect people with those as well. So know that those things are out there, these
Yeah.
people are out there, and look for them,
Yeah.
you know.
Awesome. I love that. I love all of that. And then one more thing that I would like to ask you, if someone has heard something that you said in today's show and they're really interested in reaching out because they want more information or they have questions, how can they get in contact with you?
So I'm on Instagram at CT Counseling. So that's C as in cat, TEA, and then counseling with two L's. And I'll be on Facebook soon. It's there. I'll get there. And I have a website, so cupofteacounseling.org with two L's. And I know you'll probably include it in the show notes,
Yep.
but I have a contact form on my website, so you can get me or somebody from my team directly through that contact. And there are usually resources on my blog as well on my website. And my website is under construction, so you'll see a bunch of new things soon, but the website will stay the same, cupofteacounseling.org.
Awesome, with 2 L's, and yes, we will have a link, for you to be able to click, and for those of you who are on audio only, make sure that when you spell counseling, you spell it with the 2 L's. Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Dyette, for just spending your time with us this morning. I know that your schedule I know your schedule, so I know you have a lot on your plate, and so as always, it was a privilege connecting with you. It was a privilege being able to introduce you to our audience. And I look forward, you guys will be seeing Dr. Dyette and some of our other colleagues as well, because some of the things that she mentioned today around dynamic disabilities and chronic illness, we'll get into some of the more specific ones. We kind of just gave a general overview today, but we'll talk about some specifics. And also, she mentioned a couple of times around COVID and how this pandemic has affected us as clients, as a society as a whole, but also as mental health professionals, as clinicians as well. And so we'll get into some of that. And actually, we plan to do a series with our colleagues. So it will be, you'll see us here, but you'll also see a few others. And we're just going to have a really open discussion about it. You know, we're going into year 3 of a pandemic. This is something that no one in our lifetime has ever seen. And so, if you guys have any questions about it, you can shoot an message to me. You can email me at info at love-acceptance.com. If you have any questions or any thoughts or suggestions about things that you'd love us to address, we have that coming up within the next couple of months as well. So, again, thank you, Dr. Dyette, for your time this morning. And I
Thank
thank
you.
you guys for tuning in.